Hey, I'm James from UA, and today I'm going to walk you through the new UAD Showtime 64 tube amp plugin. So this plugin was inspired by the big 100-watt heads that were made back in the day, kind of at the same time you had deluxes around and even twins. The Showman was a different beast where it had no reverb. It was meant to be put through closed back cabinets, 212s, sometimes 215s. So this was about big, loud, punchy, clean. And one of the great things about that is you can take that volume control, get to 2 or 3, 4 or 5 even, and you're still not distorting in a way where the smaller amps that had tube rectifiers and 18 watts would start to crumble. This thing is a solid state rectifier. It's got a tight bottom end. So I can push things to 7, 8, and 9 and get a little edge, but still maintain sort of the uniqueness of the guitar I'm playing through, which is one of the great things about these amps is we talk about what's a great pedal platform, what's a great guitar platform. I'm going to show you these kinds of guitars. I've got 3 or 4 other classic guitar types, and you'll hear each one, even if I keep the same setting, you can hear the uniqueness in each instrument. And that doesn't happen sometimes if you were to play like an AC30 or a small deluxe. That amp on 4 or 5, everything kind of has a sound to it, which is great in one way, but also a bummer if you're trying to do a little bit more of a tone sculpting thing with the instruments and pedals in front of it. So we're going to walk through some of the things I can do by changing guitars and pulling up some different clean sounds all the way to edge of breakup and show you how we can dial this in. All right, so let me walk you through using a stock preset that I wrote in here called Bright and Chimey. So this is dead clean. You kind of can't go wrong. If I just play this guitar into it, it's what you think of as perfectly clean. It's not dirty in any way. I can hit it harder, it stays tight. There's not a hint of dirt in that. So one of the cool things that we can do is go through the cabs. So right now, I'm kind of based on a 414 mic, which has a lot of top-end air. Now, this comes with the 212 closed back, and you get that same cab, but in 3 variations. And what we're doing is changing the mic options. I picked 3 flavors of mics that I thought would give you a good way to translate cleans. And I see cleans as sort of 3 ways. There's kind of hi-fi cleans, which in this case, this preset uses a 414 condenser mic. You've got like your dynamic mics, which are like 57s, which are pokey and bright and in your face. And then you've got ribbon mics, which I like an M160. So as I turn up the amp and get more distorted, I tend to go with a warmer microphone. So what I'll do is I'm going to play this clean preset, and then I'm just going to move the mic sets around with the cab, and you'll hear the difference. So here's our bright, punchy hi-fi 414. So here's your ribbon. So this is going to be big, warm. Compared to the 414. And then the last set here is a classic combination of the 57 dynamic mic for the sort of punch and forwardness, along with a ribbon R121, which is low, mid-range, and bottom end. So I pre-mixed this for you. So this is kind of a middle ground between the all-dark ribbon and the super bright condenser from before. So you have the high end, but you've also got the bottom end of a ribbon mic. 414. Ribbon. And I can exaggerate that more. The more the amp distorts, the more you're going to notice those mics gently moving the high end around. So let's just put the amp on 10. And you'll notice I still have a clean sound, and it's punchy, and it's not a fuzz box. And if I hit a palm mute, that 414 being the hi-fi low end sort of thing that it does, it'll be really subsonic low end. Now, I'm still tight, and I am on 10. So that's one of the great things about it, is having the crunch, but it's also really punchy and it's not compressed. So between those three sets of mics, which remember, we're still using the same speaker, the microphones make a huge difference in how you're going to place this in your mix. All right, so let's dig into the front panel. Okay, remember, no reverb, so we don't have to worry about that. One of the most important things about this high headroom amp is how the bright switch works, which doesn't seem obvious at the top, but the way a bright switch works is the lower my volume control is, the more the bright switch actually does something. There's a capacitor back there that if the amp's on 10, and I'll show you this, the bright switch actually does nothing. So if I turn it off, there's no change there. That's because as the volume control goes up towards 10, that cap does less and less and less. And that becomes a problem for some people who use like deluxes in our Dream. A low setting means the bright cap is really active. It's really bright at low volumes. And a lot of amps are like this. So I can go over here and I'll show you the same difference. Let me go back and I'm going to put it on 3, which is a good middle ground. So now you'll hear the difference between no bright cap and on. Really crispy. It's there and it's... That is super hi-fi, in-your-face, clean. Now, the fun thing is, putting this up to like 6 or 7 means I'm downing a little bit of that harshness out, but I'm still clean, unlike the low wattage amps, which would already be distorting and you've lost your clean. So now, I'm still clean, I can take it out. It's a small difference, but it's enough to give me a little clarity if I want it. So this gives me a whole range of the volume knob to play with where that bright cap is sort of affecting me. So I used to like 7 is kind of one of my favorite spots. It's going to do something, but not a lot. So, and then on. Just a little bit of a punch there. In fact, I'll go back to 6 and give you a little more. So. Another important thing, unlike one of my favorite amps back there, a lot of these amps, like a Deluxes don't have mid-range controls. So you were also stuck with sort of a smile curve where the mid-range was pulled out. And to do that, like if I come down here and I'll pull the mid-range down to like 2, that's very sort of clean, classic scooped black panel sounds. But the fun thing is I can just take that mid-range, put it all the way up to 10. Now the mid-range is actually pushing the amp a little harder. And you start to get almost more of the tweed sounds where they're a little more sort of dirty and edgy because you're using the mid-range forwardness of that control. And you can hear the difference between that on 10 is actually... Just pulling that down to 4. You can hear how the amp's not only cleaning up, it's a little tighter, it's less in your face. Now, the bass control here also does a lot. So if I pull this off, usually you get to about 4 on these and the bottom just kind of shows up, and they kind of all used to do this. Past that, you can get really... That is a lot of bass, and it's not uncommon for bass players to use Showmans. So if you want to track sort of a 60s hip Beach Boys bass, take your P bass, take your jazz bass, shove it in here, and then you're actually going to have a lot of that sound. So there's nothing off limits about it, which is the whole reason why you get an amp called the Bassman, which is one of the favorite guitar amps of all times. So again, this circuit, meant to be big and clean, is great for bass or like low-tuned baritone instruments or the 6-string bass like John Lennon used to play and a few other people like Glenn Campbell. So you have that middle ground of guitar meets sort of 6-string bass thing. So we only got one thing left. It's tremolo. And this circuit is basically the same classic tremolo that you've seen in every amp, which of course is technically labeled vibrato. Hey, we know they messed it up years ago. That's not our fault. So let's turn on the tremolo. So the one interesting thing to note is really the faster you get, the softer the waveform is. So when you have a really slow tremolo on these tube amps, it's really choppy. And the cool thing of why tube tremolos are amazing is because as the speed goes up, the coners kind of round off a little bit. It gets a little more forgiving as you get the speed up. So just as an example, I'm going to put the depth all the way up, intensity, that is. You really hear the on and off. And at this point, it's so fast, it doesn't have time to actually turn the whole thing off. So you... So that's pretty much the whole front panel. There's not much to it. The real fun comes when we start changing different guitars, the different pickup combinations, tone controls on the guitar, different playing styles, and you'll see how the amp sort of takes those unique guitars and keeps all the unique characteristics. And then I'll show you some kind of fun things to do later on once we start adding room as well. Okay, so I've picked a new preset. This is called Vintage Clean. It's a ribbon mic. It's very 60s. It's gonna be big and warm, not too bright at all. So even though I have a really bright sounding guitar, it's gonna be big and rounded off. So even on my bridge pickup, it's not gonna get harsh at all. Again, from earlier, I know I can change that mic out and probably re-EQ this whole thing. So as an example, let's go to 414. Now that's cool, but one thing I want to do is go back to ribbon and let's push the amp up to like 6 or so. And then actually give ourselves some mid-range. This preset is going to stay completely clean almost with the volumes on 10, because if you notice, the mid-range is on 1. And this amp does a better job of getting more sort of overdrive and clipping out of it if you push the mid-range. So we're going to get that up a little bit to like 5. Now, let's change guitars. Okay, so now let's hear that same setting I had up here, which is this modified Vintage Clean, and you're gonna hear it with these pickups, which are a little hotter, bigger, and pokier, so. Now, this doesn't sound anything like the last guitar. So you can hear that this thing kind of kept its sort of weirdness about it because it has these sort of single coils, but they're bigger, louder, really in your face. Let's go to the next set, and I'm going to change to humbuckers. All right, now let's hear some PAFs from around 1960, 1961 on this 335. You're starting to get sort of an almost sort of jazz rock sound out of it, which you kind of get the... Again, the amp is still clean, so you can hear when I even start playing neck pickup kind of... Now we're going to throw a curveball at it. Let's go with a Ricky. immediately you can actually hear how this guitar is way more in your face. It doesn't have the buttery thing that 335 PAF pickup did, but this is a little more mid-rangey, and the bottom end is kind of taken out of it. And oddly enough, we haven't touched the amp at all. So you've heard this amp sound big and luscious on the bottom. You've heard it sound bright. You've also heard it sound kind of small and honky and in your face by doing nothing but changing the guitars. So this kind of shows you why this amp is so good at taking whatever you give it and sort of keeping this sort of weirdness of what you're feeding the amp, which in this case is a very sort of Beatle-esque sort of Tom Petty kind of sound. And if I add the bright back in, that'll give me a little more jangle. It almost sounds like I changed the amp along with a few other things, and I haven't touched anything. One fun thing is I'm going to push this preset a little harder, but I'm also going to turn up the room. Super unique sound. I'm going to leave that and go back to the main red Strat. So if my math is good here, this should sound big and sort of fluffy on the bottom end, and even a little sort of hi-fi on the high end, a little pokier. So funny enough, what you're hearing is bigger bottom end. The mid-range is not here on this guitar. This guitar almost has a scooped V sound of its own, where that Ricky had it sort of over the top. So imagine that guitar with the mid-range on 10, where for me, to get this to sound like the other thing, I actually have to go to the amp and push the mid-range. But also, these sort of sounds are... So more bottom end, but the cool thing is the amp can translate all of that. It never bottomed out at all. So to give you an extreme case of this, let's just start diming controls. And even if the amp is on 10 and the mid-range is on 10, the amp still has a tightness to it. So you're still going to hear a unique sound with a little bit of overdrive. So let's give that a shot. Volume on 10. Remember, bright cap doesn't do anything on 10, so it doesn't matter. We'll just leave it where it is. We're going to give ourselves some mid-range, leave the bass where that is, and let's see what happens. And I'm going to start pairing a few things together for you. So I'm going to start with one called Roadhouse Beef and the PAFs and the 335. Next preset, Warm Jazz. Purposely staying with this guitar on the neck pickup. Losing the pick, got to play with the thumb, West style. Same guitar. Gonna go to the bridge pickup, but I'm gonna double down on this preset called Overdrive Honk, because the main thing about it is that mid-range is on 10. So the neat thing about the amp we talked about earlier is if that mid is up, you're gonna get a little bit more distortion. So mid on 10, this should get you a little bit more of an aggressive growl. I'm sticking with this overdrive honk with the mid up, and also went with a mid forward guitar like we talked about. This thing has a lot of ground, no bottom end. So it is nothing but aggressive in your face mids, which if I play a few things, you should probably be able to tell where I'm going. So even though this preset I've got called Bluesy Room was sort of meant for your 60s blues stuff with a room, I'm using it to sort of create a sort of space that's sort of this isolating, let's say, person in the corner in a room by themselves, kind of finger picking, which I think it's really good for showing the sort of spatial things that you might want a part to speak out. So a little finger picking, I've got a long reverb on top of that room sound. So you're gonna get a real sense of space here. All right, so I've got the warm, clean tone preset up. All I did was move from the 160 ribbon to the combo of the 57 and 121 ribbon mic. It'll give me a little extra high end, and I got a little bit more room. So this amp being clean and big and powerful means I can hit it with this really low-endy big fuzz, and it'll still clean up and sound shimmery when I roll my volume down, but still sound kind of like a bear attacking you. Well, hopefully that gives you some ideas of what you can do with the Showtime 64 amp plugin. It's available natively right now, so go grab your songs, get your pedals and your guitars ready, and I hope you have as much fun using it as we did getting to make it.